My name is James McQuiggan. I'm a security awareness advocate at KnowBe4. And for the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to go through and going to talk to you about security awareness and training, talk about the program, setting up a program, tips and best practices to have a successful program. So kind of want to start things off rather than dive right into it. I want to kind of put a question to you. But if you, in your neighborhood, because our home is our sanctuary, if you had discovered or learned that there were burglaries going on in the neighborhood where the bad guys are walking up to the door and knocking on the door, ringing the doorbell, nobody was answering, they would go around to the back of the house and break in one of the windows and climb in and steal anything they could get their hands on and then leave, all before getting caught. If we learned that that was going on in our neighborhood, we would probably take the necessary steps to make sure that we understood how they were doing it and then take the precautions and mitigate the risk of protecting our home. So we might turn on the monitoring system of our security system or get an alarm system put in, might have some floodlights, motion sensor lights turned on, maybe install some cameras. You might even put a beware of dog sign in your front window, and then when they ring the doorbell, it plays the sound of barking dogs and freaks out your 3 cats. Those kind of things do work as a deterrent. But you have that awareness of what's going on in your neighborhood, so you decide to take the necessary steps to protect your home. Okay, now if you discovered that cyber criminals were stealing data from your organization and you learned that they were doing it through phishing emails, what could you do to help protect your organization? And that's what we're going to go through today. So Chris gave me a fantastic introduction. Other fun tip is I'm also a college professor. So I'm talking to students twice a week about cybersecurity. This is something that I'm really passionate about. I really do enjoy talking about cybersecurity, tips, tricks, best practices. If I go fast, I do apologize because I do get excited with this. But as we go along, if you do have questions, drop them in the chat, and then I will try and get those answered for you at the end. I did even have the chat window up, but it's not up anymore, so we'll just keep going. It'll be a nice surprise for me when I get to the end and see all those fun questions. So with KnowBe4, where we work, if you've heard about KnowBe4, great. If you haven't, just real quick, we are one of the world's largest security awareness training company, Phishing Assessments. Got a whole program around doing phishing assessments and training people and educating them. We're based out of Tampa Bay, out of the west side of Florida. And you can see all the accolades and everything there. But enough about us. So when it comes to security awareness programs, whether you have one, thinking about one, or don't have one, CISA recognizes, and CISA is the cyber, I'm blanking on it. No, it's not. It's the Center for Information Security Association, or Infrastructure and Security Association. But they recognize the need to have security awareness programs. This is coming from Boyd and Roner, who is a deputy director for operations with the NCIC related with CISA, saying that you need to have a culture of security. It's one thing to do the awareness. It's more important that you create that culture that you have within your organization, giving your team and your organization the best chance of winning, essentially, against the various cyber attacks. Even CISOs recognize that security awareness programs are important. You need to have that training, whether it's coming from health organizations, MasterCard, standard industries, all of them have come forward and said, hey, we need to make sure that we have these security awareness programs so that our employees are educated and they are aware. So like you have with your home, you learn about something going on, you take the necessary steps to protect your home. Same thing applies where in the organization, you need to make sure that you're doing that protection as well. It's not an information security presentation without stats and charts and graphs. Now, there aren't too many, and I do apologize. It might be a little small to see some of the numbers, but essentially across the bottom, we're looking at all the different years, and we're looking at a growth chart of the number of attacks and the billions of dollars that have been spent over the years in cybersecurity. And more money is getting spent, and the attacks are still coming and coming and coming. So, we're kind of keeping up. We're keeping on par, but the number of attacks is still going. Now, it's been said humans have always been the weakest link in security, and I'm going to kind of refute that here in a minute. But basically, because of phishing, stolen credentials, over 50% of the different breaches that have occurred have been a result of some type of human error. So that human layer, that eighth layer, if you want to call it, of the OSI model, for those of you that are familiar with the Cisco products and networking, and I did my time in IT. But the human layer represents that high value probability target, and it's a low cost. It's an easy target for the cyber criminals. But when we look at the investment that's made into the human, it's that little one there on the probably on the far right-hand side of your screen. Network, 47% of the budget goes to it, 22% to endpoint, 14% to web and identity. So you're protecting the websites, identity access control, but there's less than 3% being spent on the human, yet we're calling them the weakest link. And security training has evolved over the years. It used to be just something you did in-house. You create your own programs. People were creating all these different newsletters and creating their own training programs. And then you started getting some basic content vendors that might provide you an LMS with some PowerPoint slides that have been automated, maybe some videos, simple videos. Then you get into phishing simulations. Now you're starting to go through and assess your employees. You start looking at metrics now once you're doing those phishing assessments. And then you eventually want to get yourself to a security culture, similar to what we heard Boyden mention in that first slide with her quote. You want to have, right now, the security awareness is great, but to really get to the level that you want to be able to protect your organization, you want to have that strong security culture. So 5 considerations that you want to think about with regards to your security awareness program within your robust security program. Align with the missions and values and goals of your organization. Make sure that whatever your security awareness program is doing aligns with whatever your business model is. If you're there to take care of customers, then make sure that your security awareness deals with customers inside of your training videos or relating to customers. If you're making widgets, again, the same thing. Measure twice, cut once. For those of you that do a lot of woodworking, you know that it's a good rule of thumb to measure things twice and then cut once. Want to look at measurements. You want to look at ways that you can go through and measure and come up with those different metrics. And we're going to talk about some different metrics you can use. Collaborate with the business. Don't just make this the IT or the InfoSec department thing. We're going out. Everybody's got to take it. Get with the business and collaborate with them. Think like an attacker, and then plan with marketing campaigns in mind. Again, that's a way to get the business involved. And then align with the corporate and the locale culture. So if you're a global organization, you're going to want to look at that. So those are kind of the 5 considerations you want to have for your program. So thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I hope you enjoyed it. No, don't panic. I'm not done yet. I'm only kidding. So 5 things. Great. I've given you 5 things that we're gonna look at. But before we do that, let's have a look at the weakest link. But in my opinion, what I consider to be the strong.
Imagine an information security system so advanced it can learn. Its unparalleled processing power allows incredible features such as facial recognition, intelligent contextual decision-making, and even the ability to detect and react to localized ambient and physical threats. It can instantly assess suspicious activities on the network, as well as in the business environment, faster than any currently available information security cyber threat detection system. Its name? Derek. Yes, your employees. The best security money can buy.
But people essentially are the critical layer within the fabric of your security program. I always talk, when I talk with people, IT folks, InfoSec folks, and they're like, yeah, humans, they're just the weakest link. They're always clicking on those emails. Well, the argument that we come back with, and we have those discussions, is the fact that they're not educated. When you're in first grade and somebody goes, hey, what's 10 times 10? You're not going to know the answer to that. And somebody could turn to you and say, oh, well, you're just so stupid. You don't know what you're doing. but you haven't been educated and haven't learned yet. If people can get that education and that awareness and that learning, then they're going to be able to spot those phishing attacks. And so that's kind of where we're going. But when we're looking at people, I want to look at the root of deception, because a lot of the times that's what ends up happening to people when they fall for one of those phishing attacks. Our jobs are the job of our brain is essentially we're going to filter things, interpret it, present a particular type of reality to us. So, for example, did you have to reread it? It's what I if told you. You read the top line wrong. Our brains are basically going through and reading and automatically deciding what that's actually going to say. So, what if I told you? Because it's Morpheus, and if you've seen the movie The Matrix, you know that's one of his common lines in in the movie. What if I told you that everything you believed isn't real? What I if told you? So your brain is working on autopilot as it goes through, because it's already recognizing Morpheus and having that saying in the head. So what this comes down to is two different types of thinking. And Daniel Kahneman, who is a Nobel Prize winning marketing behavioralist, economic behavioralist, came up with two types of thinking, systems of thinking. And he was looking at this based on impulse buying, people that buy things really quick, and then take and go through a methodical process to think about, okay, can I afford this? Do we have the budget? How can I wait on it? Do I need it? Do I want it? But this type of thinking, this system one and system two thinking, is what we're doing all the time, every day. You know, whether we're going through our emails and we're scanning through, you know, we're just trying to clear out that inbox, it could be system one. If I were to say what's 2 plus 2, you know that it's 4. That's something you already know. You're reacting to it. You can give a response. But if I were to say what's 6,184 divided by 28, you're not going to know the response right away. But you could sit down with a piece of paper and a pencil and calculate that. Or you could bust out your iPhone, your phone, your smartphone, open up the calculator and enter it in and get the result that way. But the idea here is the two different types of thinking. Your system one, you're fast, it's error prone, but it scans the environment continuously, and it's always working automatically. Your system two, the slow thinking, it takes effort. You got to work through it. It is slower, but it's more reliable and accurate, and it's really used in your problem solving. So with regards to that system one, the fast, and the system two, the slow thinking, we want to apply that to when it comes to our emails. Because a lot of the time that's how people end up falling for it, is they're scanning through and they end up taking a reaction. But there's a concept called the OODA Loop. The OODA Loop stands for observe, orient, decide, and the A is for act. And these are critical thinking steps that were developed by or conceived by Colonel John Boyd of the Air Force, who was a dogfighter pilot. And essentially, in a dogfight, he's observing, he's seeing things, he's hearing things, smelling, but then orienting himself based on norms, based on experience, based on what he learned. Then he's making a decision and then acting upon that. And his whole concept was, what if we can make them observe and then react? And I know there's a line from the Top Gun movie where you don't have time to think, but here in this concept, if you have that OODA loop, how do you mess with it? Well, the ideal situation for a social engineer, basically a cyber criminal sending those phishing emails, is they want to hijack that OODA loop. They want you to take that knee-jerk reaction, you know, and click on that link or open that attachment. And they want you to bypass those three, bypass the orient and decide steps and go from observe, see it, and act. So within social engineering, real quick, high level, there are different lures that they like to use to get their victim, their mark, to take a particular action. Greed, urgency, curiosity, fear, self-interest, helpfulness. A lot of these are commonly used. Last summer, if you remember, on Twitter, Bill Gates, Barack Obama, I think was one of them, Jeff Bezos, highly prominent people, celebrities, people with lots of money, posted a certain tweet that said, hey, for the next 30 minutes, if you give us $1,000 in Bitcoin, we'll give you $2,000 back. Well, it's coming from somebody that's got lots of money, like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, and you got 30 minutes. So there's a sense of urgency and there's a sense of greed. 110 people fell for it within the 30 minutes before it got taken down. Interestingly enough, the teenager that coordinated that attack to get into Twitter was just sentenced to 3 years in jail. But these social engineering lures is what the cyber criminals are using to manipulate us to get us to take the necessary action. So looking at kind of the human brain and why we do certain things as humans, let's now talk about preparing for that security awareness program. So if you're not prepared for an attack, well, you're certainly headed down an ugly road really, really fast. I'm hoping those porta potties aren't full. But anyway. All right, so let's go back to our 5 considerations: goals, measurements, collaboration, thinking like an attacker, and aligning with corporate culture. So let's look at the first one: align with goals, missions, and values. You want to review, as I said before, review your company goals, missions, and values when you're creating your security awareness, or if you've got one now, make sure that you're aligned with that. Whether it's with the security awareness program, but get together with various division leaders, employees at all levels to get their understanding of the business. And then you want to think smarter. And essentially, smarter breaks out into an acronym where you want your program to meet each of these different concepts. Keep it specific, have it measurable. And we're going to talk about measurements in a second. Have it actionable, have things that they're able to do, not just sitting there watching a video. Risk gets a little involved as well. Time keyed. You want to make sure that you're keeping up with current events, keeping up with the training is not just something that's from a couple of years ago and you're repeating it. Keep it exciting. Exciting is always a good thing because if people can be energized or interested in the security awareness program, I know it's like watching paint dry for some folks, but keeping it exciting helps drive an interest. And we're going to talk about some ways to do that as well. And then keep it relevant, keep it up to date. You know, you're not talking about phishing attacks from 2010. You're talking about how they're doing phishing attacks nowadays. So let's look at measure twice, cut once. Let's look at some measurements. One of the ways to do the measurements is have a look at what it costs to recover from a successful phishing attack within your organization, whether you've had one or not, or you can reach out to other organizations that you know. But have a look at essentially the productivity lost. So if one person gets hit with a phishing attack and their machine gets infected, now we have to take their machine, run a scan, maybe even have to reinstall the operating system. So they have to send their computer back in, or they got to go see IT. 24 hours later, they get their machine back, or however long it takes to re-image the box, back up the data. All that is a loss of productivity. If that's one person and it's 8 to 12 hours of productivity loss, plus now you've got an IT guy that you've hired and is going through and doing that, their costs, you kind of add that in, multiply that by how many people in your organization that if they fell for that phishing attack, what are those costs going to be? Workstation checks, usually those are good for workstation in the sense of physical desks. And I know with everything with COVID, everybody's working remotely, but if you are in the office, you want to make sure that with the workstation checks, it's the physical workspace. They're not leaving their laptops out. They're not, unless they're locked up. They've got their drawers locked. They're not leaving sensitive or confidential information left out, those kind of things. Looking at employee recognitions for incidents reported. So if you've got a phishing campaign going on and you've got, with KnowBe4, we have the phish alert button that we provide that sends that phishing email into a designated person within IT, and then they can look to check if this is a real phish or not. But also when you're doing your phishing assessments, you can, if your employees are sending in going, hey, I saw this as a phish, then you can easily respond, or an automated response where it's like, congratulations, you caught one of the phishes. Completed training is another metric. You have your virtual risk officer, and then you have your phishing assessments as well. I'm going to go into the virtual risk here in just a sec. But also consider your position. At the beginning, I talked about the different security programs over time. Again, this is that same thing. Where are you in this grand scheme of security awareness programs? Are you on phase 3 where you're ongoing? You've got it where you're approved, you're doing your assessments, you've got frequent training, or even to the point where it's automated, where somebody sends in, hey, I saw this as a phish, and it automatically responds back rather than waiting for the human. So consider where you are and adjusting that with your measurements as well. With the KnowBe4 security awareness training, we look at it as train your employees, assess them, phish them, and then analyze the results. Anybody that's clicking on links okay, then you need to start sending them maybe a couple more phishing assessments, maybe a little harder, maybe a little simpler, maybe even have a conversation with them. Those kind of things is what you're looking at. But one of the metrics that we have that we talk about a lot is what we call the phish prone percentage, the PPP. But the phish prone percentage looks at how many times people are clicking on links, falling for that phishing assessment. And this is one of the charts that we have from our report last year, where healthcare on the breaking out into the small, medium, and large, you got healthcare pretty well in all three of those, unfortunately. But 45% of the people are falling victim to a phishing attack. So if you've got 100 people in your organization, that means 45 of them practically are clicking on that link. So, if we go back to the example at the beginning where you have your home that you're protecting and you've got all the security measurements and things in play, that's almost like locking down the house and somebody knocks on the door and somebody opens up the door and lets the bad guys in and go, yeah, sure, take whatever you want. 1 in 2 people in that particular case. But looking at the phish prone percentage, when we have those statistics, that's what we're looking at without the training. So that's kind of what we call phase 1. Without any training, let's get a baseline, figure out where they are, and then from there, after about 90 days, you enter into what we call phase 2, and that now drops it down to about just a little under 15% on average. And you can look at your particular industry and see where you fit based on the tens of thousands of organizations that we're supporting. But you can kind of get an idea that after 90 days, you now go from 45% down to about 15%. So a great statistic and a great drop, reducing that risk for your organization. After about a year, now you're down to less than 5%. So in that organization of 100 people, you've now gone from almost 1 in every 2 people clicking on the link to 1 in almost every 20. So great reduction in risk. But as I've been told, and I've heard the stat, the bad guys only need the one chance to get in the door, and that's right. But you don't want to make it so that 1 out of every 2 people do it. Now it's a lot easier to manage if you've got 1 out of 20, whether you've got a SOC or you've got your IT, your technology that's monitoring the network, looking for those kind of things that can spot that. So that's important. NIST just recently came out, their revision 5 of the NIST 800-53. They were basically saying you need to be doing phishing assessments, doing them frequently. Let your folks know that, hey, you're going to be doing phishing assessments, but don't tell them when and don't tell them what to look for. But you do want to make sure you're having that. Make it more than just links. Make it something where they're opening attachments, enabling macros, turning over credentials. They go to a login page and they enter in their credentials. Use spear phishing. Maybe even do some OSINT within your organization, open source intelligence. Google your organization and see what kind of information's out there and use that to create those emails for your employees. Why? Because the bad guys are already going to be doing it already. So, if you got a press release coming out and there's a new CFO starting at the company, leverage that to be where, hey, as the new CFO, I've realized we have a large surplus. So everybody's going to get a bonus of $500. Now, depending on culture, depending on what's going on in your organization, you got to take those into consideration. But you have that spear phishing email go out and it's like, here, just click on the link to sign up to confirm that you want to receive the bonus. I have a feeling you'd probably get a lot of people that might fall for that. So your risk score, your virtual risk officer, there's going to be a risk score that comes out of the phishing assessment platform that we have. It takes into a whole lot of consideration the position of where you work. If you're the CEO, you're at a higher risk. If you're somebody that's working on the front desk, you might have a little less risk score. Depending if you've reported emails, you've clicked on any of them, that'll adjust your risk score as well. But successes and failures are important. So that you can learn from it, but also being able to track the different ones. I don't expect you to see all the different charts on there. It's just to kind of give you an idea, the different measurements that you can be doing with regards to your security awareness program, whether it's phish prone percentage, workstation checks, people reporting, those kind of things. With regards to the phishing assessments, we see the top 5 spoof brands out there: Microsoft, UPS, Amazon, Apple, Zoom. The cyber criminals are always using those type of brands, scraping it from the website to try and make it appear that, hey, this is actually from Amazon. Thanks for your recent survey you submitted or your recent review you put on the website. Here's a $25 gift card. top click phishing tests with regards to social media. LinkedIn is the big one. For me, with your organizations, you don't want to be using your work email for your LinkedIn profile unless there's a requirement or whatever. But personally, I use my personal email address. So when something comes in on my work email from LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever going, hey, somebody tagged you in a picture, I know it's not accurate. Across the board, there's an 87% improvement that you're going to have with doing any type of phishing assessments, whether it's an OODA or whether anybody else. But I got to say, with OODA, you can look on average that we've had 87% dropped. You're reducing your malware infections, your data loss. You're increasing productivity because now you're not getting as many people's machines are getting infected. So collaborating with the business. Now, I touched upon this a little bit earlier, but getting together with the business, the different division leaders, different managers, this works better in the medium and the enterprise organizations, but work with them to see what are some of the pain points for them. If they got to do the training, what is it that they like, they don't like? Is there particular topics? There may be, if it's in finance, you want to have a look at more of the phishing emails that come in relating to finance or HR, like business email compromise, those kind of things. You could also do a champion program. I ran one of these when I worked at Siemens 11 years ago. But basically, with 10,000 people that worked in the US for Siemens, we had offices all over the place. Well, in each one of those offices, I had a champion or an ambassador that would connect with me and be the liaison for them in their department or their office and their location. So that way, if they had questions or there were concerns, they could go to that ambassador there in the location, and then they could come back to me. So that way I wasn't having to deal with information security questions. It was just a lot easier for them. And they get trained and educated as well. They attend meetings, and it's just a great interface also to be able to raise up the culture within the organization. Think like an attacker, plan like a marketer. What I mean by that is within IT, with your InfoSec folks, think about ways that hackers are going to try and get into your organization through those phishing emails, USB drops, whatever it takes. But then get with your marketing folks because they're doing campaigns all the time and they can help schedule it. You don't want to always send out the same training modules to everybody. Stagger them out, different groups to different programs to different folks. Newsletters could go out at different times, once a month, or newsletter email. You could have videos. You could have handouts like the social engineering red flags, a PDF that is available, and I can send it to you if you need it. But things to watch for in your email. 22 different red flags or things to watch for when you get an email. Now, are you expected to know all 22 right out of the gate? No. But if you have it printed up or have it nearby, you can refer to it. And as they become more and more familiar with it, then their sixth sense kicks in. And so when they get that phishing email, they kind of get kind of a weird vibe about it. It's like there's something not right on this based on what they've learned from the training program, but also from the red flags. You could also even have a PDF of rogue URLs. A lot of the times the cyber criminals are going to create fake websites that are similar to your website. So, or a vendor website, depending on whatever the target is. So for example, I don't think it's on that one, but Bank of America, one of the tricks that we've seen, it's kind of exposed now, but where the website wasn't Bank of America, it was Bank of Arnerica, A-R-N-E-R-I-C-A. So the R and the N, very, very close together, especially if you're looking at it on a phone, looks like an M. So if you're kind of doing that system one thinking where you're zipping through, you're going to see that. You're going to see the BA, and then you're going to look at the .com. You're like, yeah, okay, it looks like Bank of America, and you're going to end up clicking. One of the things to do is when you get those links is check the links to make sure that it's not rogue. One of the other great programs that we have, and it's a fantastic series, The Inside Man. This is done, I kid you not, it's done like a Netflix series. You can practically binge it, but it's each season, there's been 3 of them now. We had the first one, we did the second one last year, and now we've had the 3rd season come out. Each one is about 10 episodes, and each one is about 8 minutes long, but you get engrossed in it. I've had friends of mine that work at other companies that have KnowBe4, and they have The Inside Man, and they'll call me up going, hey, when's the next season coming up? We just finished the 2nd season. We can't believe you put us on a cliffhanger. What happens next season? And they get into it. The great thing about Inside Man is it wasn't written with security first, it was written with story first. It's a story with characters and the feelings that you have, and you get an interest in those characters. And then there are the security subliminal messages underneath. And a lot of the time people will go through and they're like, hey, they're not supposed to do it that way, or they've just lost their phone. They got to report it to IT, those kind of things. And that's where you start to see that the culture starts to pick up based off your security awareness program. So aligning with corporate and local culture. And this is kind of, well, it's not kind of, this is that next evolution with security awareness programs. 10 years ago, coming out with the security awareness programs, get it, people aware. That's great. You want people to be able to go home and do the same things. It now has to become a culture. And security culture is essentially, it may be the next buzzword, but it's what you want to achieve within your organization, is have that security-minded culture. As I said before, people are a critical layer within the fabric of the program. So I look at this as the ABCs of security. You got awareness, behaviors, and culture. So I've talked about an awareness program and things that you can do within your awareness program. What you want now is to get certain behaviors from that to help grow your security culture in your organization. Because security awareness and secure behavior aren't the same thing. There's a bit of a gap in between there, that knowledge gap. And essentially what it comes down to are three realities. Just because I'm aware doesn't mean I care. And that's what your employees are going to say. A couple weeks ago, we had a training program put out within KnowBe4. And it's like, all right, I got to go through and do it because I got to get it done. And I'm going through and I'm doing it. It was dealing with embargo stuff. And it was just like, all right, just got to get through. I don't ship anything, so why does it impact me? But even my role, I'm going off and doing presentations. I still need to be aware of the different embargo rules, countries we can work with, especially our sales folks and so forth. But there has to be, you want to make sure that your employees do care. Because if you try to work against the human, you're going to fail. You know, the rogue IT, the shadow IT groups that start up, a lot of the time IT and InfoSec, the department of no, but it's a matter of, okay, work with the business, figure out what it is they need and see what we can do to improve that. Same thing with the security awareness. People are just like, I don't have time to be able to take this training class. Okay, well then what do we need to do so that you can? Is there something we can work with the manager, you know, give you the time that you need to be able to take it and so forth. And then more importantly, what your employees do is certainly a lot more important than what they know. Because if you see them doing the behaviors and the actions, they're shredding the confidential documents when they're done with them. They're making sure they lock their workstation. They're not falling for any of the phishing emails. They're not allowing tailgaters. Those are the behaviors that you're going to be going for. But why is it so difficult to get those behaviors? BJ Fogg, who essentially is the godfather of behavior design, he basically said there's three truths about human nature. We're lazy, we're social, and we're creatures of habit. Guilty. We're lazy in the sense, and it's not everybody, but most people in general. You know, you're lazy in the sense of, it's not that you're sitting on the couch, you know, eating bonbons, watching TV all the time. You get into it kind of goes in line with the creatures of habit. You go into a schedule, a routine, you know, having to learn something new. It's like, oh, I got to learn this new training program. All right. You know, you got to go through and do this extra work. It's like, no, I just want to do what I'm doing because this is the way I'm used to it. I get up in the morning, I feed the cats, I make the coffee, I get showered, I come into my office, I do my work, I do my presentations. End of the day, I walk out of my office, cook dinner, and so forth. Creatures of habit. We're also social. We're probably all going nuts with the fact with COVID and the pandemic and not being able to see family and not being able to travel. For some people, they probably think it's great. But in general, we're socially, we like to engage and work with other people. But the behavior design, it basically came up with the concept where motivation, ability, and the prompt to get that behavior. So these three things come together. So if we talk about checking links, your motivation is going to be, making sure that it's not a phishing link. You're going to check that link. You want to make sure that you don't have to do remedial training, because if you click on a link and it's a phishing assessment, then you're going to have to, you want to go through and be able to protect that organization. The ability, you know how to find the links, you know to take the mouse and hover over it and what to check for. Understanding the makeup of a URL as well when you're going through and again, going back, looking at those rogue URLs. And then the prompt, the email may appear to be strange, something weird about it. You've got that sixth sense now. You've had the training, but the LinkedIn email is come to your work email. Well, you know you don't have that tie to that, so you should be fine. Another concept is to nudge your audience towards the behavior that you want. And this is from Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein. So you could go in and tell people, thou shalt not click on any phishing links, or you could nudge them. So in this particular example, here we have, and I do apologize to the ladies, a men's urinal. But in Germany, there was a custodian that worked at an all-boys school. And every night he would go in and have to mop the floors underneath in the bathroom. And always, every night, there was always a mess of liquid underneath all the urinals. And he knew he could go to the headmaster, or he could go to the teachers and tell the students, hey, look, boys, use the urinal properly. Pay attention to what you're doing. But instead, he painted a little fly in each of the urinals. And lo and behold, the next night he comes back, and under all the urinals, the space under the urinals was a lot cleaner. It was that nudge gives them something to aim at. Landfill and recycle. You're looking at, whether you're going to put your Coke bottle, your empty Coke bottle, you're going to dump it into the ugly, gross-looking machine landfill, or the nice, clean, recyclable bin with it all nice and clean. This one I particularly get a kick out of. Here in Orlando at the supermarket, you can go in and the kids can get a free cookie. I think it's great for the kid. It's not so good for the parents because now they get on a sugar high. But anyway, here you have fresh fruit. Kids go in, they get a free piece of fruit, and then there's a measuring stick. Rather than telling the kids you need to eat more fruit, here's a free one, and you can measure to see how tall you're getting each time. So there's that. Also, donations. It's a lot easier when you're at the cash register. Hey, you want to donate up to the nearest dollar for a donation for whatever. It's a lot easier than having to pull the cash out of your pocket. So from a security standpoint, we want to nudge them in the right direction. Like with passwords, you have the little bar that's on there where when the password's not so good, it's red and may not even be accepted. But when it gets to green and they've met that requirement, you know that you've gotten the length of it, you got the special characters and everything else. That's all in there, but you're nudging them with it rather than saying, hey, you got to create a strong password. They now see the bar and it gives them that nudge. So as we're looking at culture, organizations do believe that security culture is important for success. 94% of organizations think, yes, security culture is very important. So let me give you a bit of context here. Here we have the galaxy, and our little sun is that itty bitty little speck there. Your size of your organization versus the size of your security team. It's kind of the same thing here with that sun. Even if it exploded, wasn't going to have a really big impact on the universe. But how does the size of your security team, that small team of 5 people, 10 people, 1 person, 50 people, influence your whole large organization overall in an effective and sustainable manner? The kicker is that 94% of people thinking that, security, or knowing that security culture is important, it still remains highly undefined, a standard definition. People think security culture relating to compliance, relating that everybody's responsible for security. Everybody's taken the security awareness and training. Okay, we got a strong security culture. You've got advocacy and support, and then 12% think that security culture is embedded in the organization. So we define security culture as the ideas, customs, and social behaviors that impact the security of your organization. So we look at it at 7 dimensions. Attitudes. This is whether you like it or you don't like it. If you don't like doing security training, you're like, I hate it. That attitude is going to come forth and show. Your behaviors, your actions. This is what I said earlier with regards to, what they do versus what they know. Your actions and your employees are going to have a direct impact on that security culture. The cognition, their ability to understand it. And a lot of time people get the training and they're just like, okay, fine, I'll do the training. But if they understand why certain things are in there, why do you need to hover over that link? Because if you click on the link, loss of productivity, you lose your computer, we got to re-image it, damage to the company, and so forth. The norms, the unwritten rules. When you've got a phishing email that comes in and you kind of turn to your colleague and go, hey, I got this weird email. Do you think, you're relying on those norms, the unwritten rules? Responsibilities. If people feel that is their responsibility to protect the organization, and they can do that by looking at the emails and making sure they're not clicking on links, making sure people aren't tailgating in behind them, destroying the confidential documents after they've used them, those kind of things. Communication, whether it's from the top down, up to the top, left to right, but having that communication and the ability for people to communicate about certain things, especially on different cultures, different locales, if you're a global organization. And then the compliance, being able to comply with the policies and the regulations for your security program. The critical nuances, and this goes back with regards to culture geographically. You know, your regional, your department, your HR department can be a lot different than your finance department versus the manufacturing or whatever different departments. You know, the history that you have. There was an organization just before Christmas sent out a phishing email to all the employees about a bonus coming out. Well, about a week and a half before, they laid off a substantial amount of people from their organization. And it was close to Christmas. And so a lot of people ended up falling for that phishing email, and they were furious that the company would use a money lure like that, especially with what was going on. The fact that they were struggling, now that everybody was getting this $500 bonus. So you want to kind of keep an idea of what's going on historically. Now, the cyber criminals might try and leverage that, but when it was a phishing assessment, you know, there are certain things that you do want to take into consideration with regards to that. And the preferential styles that you might have for your folks. Be aware of work from within with regards to the culture, you know, within that training, you know, the different organization rituals, traditions, things that go on within your organization. All of that kind of pulls together and help make your security culture. Now, one of the things we found in a recent culture report that we've got coming out, employees that had a strong security culture were 52 times less likely to be able to share away their credentials. So significant statistic there because of the fact that, you know, if you've got a strong security culture, your employees are going to be less likely to give up and cough up those credentials. Now, you can't train on everything. You know, I've talked about a lot of different concepts, a lot of different behaviors. What you want to do is pick 2 or 3 and focus on those behaviors at a time. You know, what are those behaviors? You know, what's going to be the most benefit? Is it going to be checking links? Is it going to be the phishing assessments? You know, focus on those for the year, and then next year or quarter, depending on how you want to do it, but focus on those heavily and get those behaviors. And then once those are part of the culture, then you can move on to the other one. Of course, that's going to involve board discussions, especially if there's money involved. But when it comes to the board, you know, a data breach is a board issue if you're in an organization that has one of those. It's an impact to revenue, brand, and reputation. They don't need to know about the type of phishing attack, the malware, and everything else. It's what is this doing to our business? How long are we going to be down for? That's what's most important to the board, especially when it comes to ransomware, because if you lose your data, you know, that's a whole nother issue altogether. And hopefully your CISO and CIO are involved in the discussions of that on a regular basis. Of course, got to have a meme. CISO's at the board meeting. I'm once again asking for more money in the cybersecurity budget. The rest of the board. So there you go. Looking back at those dimensions, you know, what I know, what I see, what I hear, what I say, what I feel. All of those go in with your culture, with what your employees are feeling. And so aligning with the cognition, the norms, the compliance, the communication attitudes, all of those have to kind of work. All of those have to work together to get that behavior that you're looking for. And then over the last 10 years or 11 years that with KnowBe4, we've seen that there are 10 different phases. And now at the beginning, I mentioned 5. This kind of stretches out a little more and we look at 10. But essentially what you're aiming for is that human endpoint where you have your employees, the people, your users in your organization, they are aware of security, they're aware of the culture, they're spotting those phishing emails. You have less than 2% on your phish prone percentage, or you're getting down to 0. We have had some organizations be able to get down to 0. So now we start focusing on other behaviors as well. So some final thoughts. At the beginning, I had there's a significant underinvestment in security awareness. So now we're kind of at the next paradigm. You know, you've got all the different tools and technology. Now you want to have that security software as a service for that platform to help mitigate your social engineering. But humans essentially are the de facto choice for cyber criminals. It's the easiest link because they know that people aren't fully educated. Once people become more educated and it starts becoming harder for them, they'll find another way. But right now, it's still working, and we're hearing about it every day. I showed you that chart at the beginning. The attacks are still going up. So what's next? You want to increase your frequency on training, on your phishing assessments, education. Don't make it a once-a-year program. National Cybersecurity Awareness Month is in October. Drives me nuts. It's like, why do we have 1 month out of the year that does this? This needs to be year-round. And it doesn't have to be that computer-based training. It could be the video. It could be newsletter. Think like the marketer. Think like the attacker, plan like the marketer. The behavioral objectives. What is it you're going to work on? Pick on those 2 or 3. Make sure that you can go through and measure it effectively. Looking at your phish-prone percentage, for example. Motivate the employees. We always think that people do better with the carrot than we do with the stick. And make it every day. If you can have it in your meetings, department meetings, have some security tip about password managers. You can get that from the InfoSec department. But be completely honest with yourself about your goals and what your culture can tolerate. And that's the important part. And lastly, I just want to leave you with this other thought. Regarding websites, does anybody know where you can go if you've got a sick one? You can take them to the urologist. So thank you for your attention. I do appreciate it. Hopefully worthwhile for you. I think I can hear the groans from everybody up there. But there's my contact information. You can find me on LinkedIn, find me on Twitter. That's my email address if you got questions.